It's Sunday, Canafam, Reefer Revolutionaries, and the murder of black men and the pretense of the war on drugs continues.
Murderers keep murdering, the churches keep a-burning, the rapists keep a-raping, and the tide ain't turning. Uncle Sam, for all your power, things get worse every hour. It seems to me your energy's all wasted, chasing my friends and me. So hey, Uncle Sam, hey there, Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone, Uncle Sam.
He ain't even resisting arrest. I cannot breathe. You just a grown, you're a tough guy. You're a tough guy, huh? I say you're a tough guy. You're not even resisting arrest, bro.
His whole nose.
You don't want to fight with him? Bro, but why you just sitting there? He ain't doing nothing now. Put him in the car.
Kill me.
How long y'all gotta hold him down?
Why don't do drugs, kids? It ain't about drugs, bro.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Y'all don't gotta put y'all.
What's up, Reefer Revolutionaries? DC here. Show's called Cannabis Saves the World. Channel's called, but it sure looks like cannabis continues to be, as well as other drugs, continue to be the precursor. At least the war on those drugs is a precursor to a lot of what we're seeing. And we're going to talk about that today. Welcome, everybody. Somber times. We were at an action yesterday in our backyard. Some of you may have been hearing about the story of Robert Fuller. It's getting national attention now. Fox News, National Newsweek, picking up on it. 300,000 signatures for the petition that some celebrities have been pushing. Kim Kardashian.
Say what you want about Kimmy. But she does
Viola
have a platform.
Davis. Even Alyssa Milano.
Problematic.
Like a broken clock.
Broken clock.
Once in a while. Small Tubes, yo, welcome everybody. MDM Niles jumping in. Welcome to the show, guys. What are you doing to stand up for social justice? Where are you going? How are we? We, of course, our focus on this show has been cannabis for a number of years. And the ending of the drug war. Legalization issues. Last week we talked about how legalization itself is not necessarily the answer. It certainly is not showing itself as the answer to ending the drug war, because it just has recriminalized or re-upped the game where arrests are up. Cannabis arrests are actually up federally. And guess of who? And it's people of color, and this is goes back to Fernando Castile was talked about in the Vice article last week that you brought up. Was it not Fernando Castile, where it was the smell of marijuana that knew the officer was so afraid by the smell of marijuana and what it would make this young man do, he had to shoot him in his car. So
Live on Facebook.
Live on Facebook, yeah. So many names that have been forgotten, and an attempt to not forget those names. An active effort to not forget names. That's just, the list is so long and continues to be added to every single day.
Well, the way we not forget those names is by ending the war on drugs. We have to put action to that remembrance.
And this is something that really has been, it's like the elephant in the room that is not really being discussed in this whole conversation of defunding the police. And it's not at the top of the list. It's in the resolution, the awesome resolution that they passed. Words, bunch of Captain Obvious statements about what's going on. And, we got a problem here. Here's the problems. No solutions. Just a big list of the problems. The war on drugs being on that list. Seems to me that pretty much both parties could right now end the war on drugs today, immediately, right now.
Yeah.
All drugs.
City councils, mayors, states. There's a lot that could be done overnight, literally overnight.
Bill de Blasio claims cannabis arrests, marijuana arrests in New York City are way down. For certain members of the population, sure. But public cannabis consumption, technically New York does not have legal cannabis. They have, medical cannabis, crappy
There's
medical
no
program.
legal public consumption in California either.
Exactly. So wherever it's legalized, there are laws and rules that are used, very similar to broken window laws. Basically, they're broken window laws that can be, enforced at will and are enforced in policing certain populations in certain communities. Because after all, that is what the police are designed to do. Mm-hmm. So, we were at a protest Wednesday. The Jackie Lacey must go with updates about that struggle in California. New and exciting news that you might want to report on, Chel, because it's progress. Yeah, they're listening. Are they listening? I don't know. But Mayor Garcetti seems to be walking back his endorsement for Jackie Lacey as DA.
Seems.
So we'll see if that's accurate.
We'll see.
But that protest every Wednesday is been going on for almost 3 years.
The demand is that she must go, not merely to rescind any endorsements. That is my personal demand to my union. Yeah. But that is not the demand in general. The demand in general is that Jackie Lacey must go. The community has no confidence in this district attorney, and Black Lives Matter has identified her as the most problematic DA in all of the United States. So Jackie Lacey must go. And anyone of conscience who has endorsed her, unions, individuals, have to rescind the endorsement if they support the movement for Black Lives, which is ironic because she's black. It's terrible. It's terrible.
But endorsed by the police unions because she doesn't prosecute cops, is basically, in the control of under the control, the limitations of what's it called? Immunity. Qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, which is basically a get out of jail free card, literally, for police to do whatever they want and kill people with impunity. And that's the excuse.
And not just kill people, but also brutalize them before killing them.
Yes, whatever crimes they commit.
Total impunity. Yeah. Absolute bullshit. And the calls to defund the police were absolutely genius because everybo's talking about what that means. It's brilliant.
There's actually a conversation going on.
It's pretty amazing.
And here's part of if the police unions weren't so corrupt and
I wish they didn't use that word.
I know, organized thuggery. Well, there's a move to get the unions, the police unions, kicked out of the AFL-CIO.
Yeah, but not by any of the big unions.
But not by any of the big
unions. It's just by the membership. The membership wants that.
Right, exactly.
Meh, the members.
So, but they're basically, the LA union, police union, or whatever they're called, Brotherhood or whatever of LAPD's, thugs, they are complaining that they're basically extorting the city, saying, "Oh, you want to cut that 150 million out of our budget? That was a record increase, by the way, this year, biggest increase ever in the city for the city of LA, LAPD. You want to cut our budget? Well, response times are going to be slower. Backups and rape cases aren't going to be investigated." I'm like, oh wow, you investigate rape cases? That's a surprise to me, because I think the only reason any of those kits got ever tested at all, and any backlog was released or brought to date, up to date, which I don't think they are in LA.
They're not.
That was because of a consent decree. I do believe, as many things are, in trying to reform the LAPD, which this is a conversation about reforming police is ridiculous. They are not reformable. They are unreformable police.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the police chief of Atlanta has basically said. I give up. They've tried to implement reforms in Atlanta for years and years, and as we just saw, no, not even a hesitation. That dude didn't even hesitate to pull out his gun and shoot the cat in the back, running away from him, trying to run for his life, because he didn't know what was going to happen after he got those cuffs on, and his mind probably just said, "Fuck this, I am out of here." Who doesn't? Who wouldn't do that, considering the circumstances? I mean, look. Okay, Ahmaud Arbery was hunted down.
Absolutely. By vigilantes.
Guess what's going on out here in beautiful Southern California, in liberal California, in blue California?
Very blue.
We were just at a growing action that we mentioned in Palmdale, California.
Not the most liberal part of California.
Not at all. And, but there were, one news source said 1,000 people were out there yesterday. Several hundred for sure. It'd be nice if it would be awesome if it was 1,000, but I don't know if there was 1,000 people in that park or in front of that police station. I mean, we marched, we followed. I mean, we were there to amplify, and terribly, by the way, our stream was horrible. I apologize.
What can you do?
The audio is just, I tried to get something together, and anyway, the important thing is what went on. And what's interesting, what went on after hundreds of people marched to the LA County Sheriff's Station, and they locked their door, hid inside in their riot gear. About 10 of them were Chela, around the backside, just just sort of hiding around the corner, not showing themselves, clearly outnumbered. And there were hundreds of people in front of this sheriff's station for an hour, probably. And then they would not, at several times, the watch commander, the guy said, he's going to come out. Now you guys got to back up. They tried to backed up a little bit. Nope, he's not coming out. We have no new information for you. Actually, and they did have information.
Not at that time.
They didn't have the statement at that time?
No.
It came later?
The statement was released at the end of the day.
So the vast majority of the protesters and the support that had come from outside of Palmdale, from LA, making the trip.
I don't know about many.
I don't know about many, but a few. But actually, I'd say it was a very large local turnout.
Definitely a large local turnout.
With a sprinkle of dedicated LA people coming up. But super large local turnout. And by far the least turnout of white people in support of this cause that we've seen at a protest yet in the LA area, which is, not nice.
Well, the thing is that the news was definitely reporting it as a suicide.
Well, that's exactly right.
It was the community outcry that made the news report it differently.
That's correct.
And now there's a groundswell because the news is reporting it differently. But the only reason the news started reporting it differently is because almost 1,000 of us showed up to say, "What the fuck, motherfuckers? Are you fucking crazy?"
Thanks to locals amplifying what went on Twitter
and social media.
That caught the eye of
activists.
The internets, of the social medias and activists, and it was spread. And now it's in the national headlines. It's being talked about. The celebrities are talking about it. The investigation, which is what happened after. So after we left, And the vast majority of protesters left. Most, I would say, probably left because everybody was there.
I'd say there was maybe 100 people.
Yeah.
When we left,
That had, all basically local
Still there.
folks, praying, singing
songs, protest songs,
speaking truth to the folks that had come to hear what happened and what's going
Community
on and
members,
what's going on in their
mothers.
community, mothers. And powerful stuff literally in the gazebo where this young man was found hanging and his body taken down at 3:30 in the morning literally the crack of dawn and in the deep of night, and taken down and moved. The body moved.
They ruined a crime scene.
40 feet away, put under a tree, and directly across the street from a fire station. This gazebo. I mean, directly. You can hit it with a rock. I could hit it with a rock. No problem. Two lanes. Fire station. And they immediately said, we're presuming this was suicide.
Immediately.
No ladder, no evidence of any way to get up there.
Yeah, there's no ladder. I mean, unless he was a parkour expert, which was not his skill set. He was a gamer.
Right.
Not a parkourer.
But yeah,
he was a gamer.
It's super questionable what's going on. And because of activism, because of support from the community and outrage in the community, the city of Palmdale has called for, there's 300,000 signatures that were gathered. Newsweek picked up on that story, that the signatures were gathered, that the family had questioned the theory of suicide. And now the California AG, because the city put out a statement and says, hey, we need an investigation. We need some help. Because
we had 1,000 people standing outside the sheriff's department, the city hall, and back again.
Protests work.
Protests work. You have to show up in the street. Protests work.
And it only takes 1%.
Clearly.
1% of a political, of a population, of a political district, of a 1% of people committed and activists and getting out and doing things to make change happen. And this is being shown across the country with these drastic changes. I mean, look, Cuomo said we won.
Go home. New York. He said we won. Go home.
Police brutality is done in the state of New York.
Yeah, sure.
It's all over. It's going to be fixed. We fixed racism and police brutality in 9 months.
Yay! No. So also we are calling for justice for Malcolm Harsh as well.
Yes.
Because Malcolm Harsh was found 2 weeks ago, allegedly hanging from a tree. But here's the thing: the media got that wrong with Robert Fuller. Robert Fuller was actually found in the gazebo and then moved to under the tree, so it looked like he was found hanging from a tree. So the stories are wrong, and we are seeing all over like blatant, gigantic examples that the police lie to their benefit. I mean, look at the Breonna Taylor incident report. So
also a no-knock warrant for a drug crime.
That's right.
For a alleged drug.
And why is Rand Paul out lefting us?
That's an excellent question.
Okay, so yes, the MDN Niles, cops' first response is violence with lies.
Yes,
100%.
Right. They get trained. The anti-bias training that institutions receive is ridiculous. It's been proven. The study just came out this week. They looked at 492 anti-bias studies or training programs, found that they're able to pass the test, but they don't. Literally, none of them are effective in change people's behavior. So, de-escalation training basically just tells them how to do it, just like anti-harassment training teaches people how to properly harass people in the workplace.
It chases people deeper into the closet.
It drives them and figure out ways to get around it, like turning off body cams by
or hiding it behind a thing.
Yeah,
defund the police, and we need to completely rethink all of these systems. And all of systemic oppression has got to fucking go. Time's up, motherfuckers. And we all have to do everything we can, which is why I am dogging my union to rescind the endorsement of Jackie Lacey. It's something that we can do. Just like going to Palmdale tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. is something that I can do. Writing emails to all my federal, state, city elected officials about getting an independent investigation for Robert Fuller and Malcolm Harsh was important to me. I did it last night. It's done. Monday, I'm going to follow it up with a phone call. Monday, I'm also calling the mayor and my city council member because they're getting a presentation on the people's budget at 1 o'clock on Monday, and I want them to know that I want them to adopt the people's budget. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do from home. You can call and write emails, but it does seem that the most effective avenue for change is lots of people showing up in the street. That's just what it seems to be. So that's what history shows us, and that's what the last couple weeks have shown us as well.
Yeah, and history has also shown that anytime there is basically any high emotional or people are saying, oh, the riots, the looting, this is a part of every protest, negative or positive. If a soccer team wins in England, they destroy shit and loot shit. Who was it? Jamie Foxx, I think, mentioned that when the Lakers won the championship, guess what happened? When Philly wins something, yeah, guess what happens? So this is just this happens. That all died down pretty quick. And here's a lots of interesting conversation on DLive. Thanks for watching on DLive. Dab of Cannabis 420. BLM is a leftist deep state organization. Antifa, George Soros, and other deep state funded this racial war. It's an election year to beat Trump at any human cost. No. I'm up for a good conspiracy theory. Antifa is an idea, not an organization.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. That's for bottom line. It's why the FBI just actually proved looked at the violence and the looting that went on in New York City the first few days at these protests, and they determined that there was no involvement with an called Antifa in any way.
No, there's no such thing.
So they literally
and
found
it's an
no
idea.
connection.
It's Antifa is anti-fascist.
Yes.
That's what Antifa is.
Yes,
I would assume everybody here is anti-fascist.
You know who's not Antifa? The cops are not Antifa.
They are fascists.
They are fascists. They are the state. And
Trump is fascist.
And
he is the state.
And all you got to look is how they're reacting to the peaceful protests and what's going on.
Yeah.
The video that Jimmy Dore I saw on Jimmy Dore clip today was the little lady walks up to the guy with pink paint all over his boots. He got splattered with some pink paint, and there's a cop in all his riot gear with his baton. And she says, "What are you guys going to do at 8 o'clock?" And he says, "We're all going to beat the crap out of you." And that's exactly what happened. Was they beat the crap out of everybody under these curfew laws. So yeah, listen, our BLM has been doing their homework for the past
10 years. 400 years.
Yeah. But as an organization and planning for this defunding of police, and the plan is to abolish the police system. The police system is the problem.
You start by defunding and eventually abolish.
And
we need a new
that
word.
is the goal. Police were designed to protect, white property. Somebody tweeted out today the cops surrounding the Wall Street Bull, protecting it on Wall Street because of the rash of statuary being defaced and pulled down across the country.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
So, we know what the police are there for. They're doing their job. That's one of the things that came out of Wednesday's protest from one of the victims' mothers of the 600 plus killings in Los Angeles by police over the last 7 years, and not one prosecuted, is that they are actually doing their job. This is why they're not prosecuted. This is what they're meant to do. They're meant to terrorize and keep communities of color in line. It's their history. It's similar to these Confederate symbols. It's history. It's our heritage. Well, yes, police's heritage is keeping track and brutalizing slaves and people of color. It just expanded. It's just their scope of authority
tracking
expanded.
Rich people's property.
Yes, right. Tracking rich people and protecting rich people's property. And basically right now their job is to protect the irritation, to help the irritations of Karens be solved. Karens get irritated, and the cops are called to solve the problem. So yes, this is exactly what the police are designed to do. They're doing their job. They're doing exactly what they're designed to do. Reform will not work. It's proven it hasn't worked. Atlanta was well under reform. They had been putting in police reforms for years, and the police chief just said after Friday, yeah, that's it. I'm done. This isn't working. You can find somebody else because, I don't know what, I don't know it. I'm not quoting her, but that's what I'm thinking. Well, that's got to be what she's thinking. Because that's the reformed Atlanta Police Department that they've just suspended the guys that tased the college kids. And because apparently they use that taser like a mother. They use that taser all the time. It looks like that's what's going on with that. And
notice that we don't actually know.
We don't know.
Because we don't get pulled over by police.
Right.
Because we look like this. And it's never been a thing. And I got news. I break the law. I do. I break the law. There are things that I do in life every day, all the time, where I break the law. I'm sure a lot of us do.
Well, that's the laws are, many laws are made to be broken. And it's like Cuomo talking today about, you guys are breaking the law. You guys are not social distancing in your bars, and we're going to take away your licenses. We're going to take away your if you don't stop doing it. Yeah, I don't stop call these women Karens. Let's put their real names out there. Yeah, do you see? Boy, I'll tell you, we got a good one out there in Torrance. Is it Torrance?
Yeah.
The community is all really outraged by this one lady. She's had a history of going around yelling and screaming at people.
I do wonder I'm not making excuses for her behavior at all, but I do wonder what her mental health status is. Another very famous older person with a racist rant, the owner of the Clippers, was it? Some sportsy team. I'm pretty sure it was the Clippers.
One of those sports teams.
One of those sportsy things. He had a massively racist rant, and it was found later that he has dementia. He was racist, and he had dementia. Just saying. That you can be both, but, it can bring out more of it. Dementia can intensify those racist ideas and bring them closer to the surface.
Dab of Cannabis 420 on DLive says the police need to change their tactics, not to defund. The thing is, these tactics are trained into them. Yeah. It's true. We give them more and more toys. The militarization of the police. And then you get training. They get trained by Israel. Police chiefs from all over the country were paid for by the Israeli lobby to go and be trained by Israel and how they put down insurgents and a population that they're trying to control. Many of those officers in Minnesota were trained. I don't know specifically if Chauvin was, but many of those officers participated in a training by the Israeli Defense Force. So they are armed like a military insurgents, an occupying army. They are trained like that. Then they are called to take care of mental health issues. So many police officers, many police departments often complain that 80 to 90% of the calls they get are not something they should be handling, and that these things should be being handled by other professionals, not cops, such as mental health crises, many domestic calls, irritation, all kinds of stuff that the cops just say we should not be doing this stuff. And the problem is they're getting all the money. They've corrupted the governments, the city governments all across the country to get the vast majority of their budgets. New York and LA are just fucking brutal examples of that. $6 billion budget in the city of New York for the police. Here it's anywhere from 2 to 3 billion, depending on who you talk to. But 54% of the discretionary budget in the city of Los Angeles goes to LAPD. No, what defunding the police is taking that money away from them and getting people on the other end of that 911 call that actually can handle mental health crises and go out to that. We literally had that issue come up in Maui, where there was no one to call but the police on someone who was having a mental health crisis.
We didn't know who to call.
Really, that's quite frankly what people don't know. They call 911 for a fire, for a heart attack. Everything else is send the cops.
Mental health crisis.
Yeah. Everything else is send the cops. And they complain on one side, yet want more and more and more and more and more and more funding. And then they say, "Oh, you're going to keep our piddly $150 million cut? Well, we're just going to not answer the phone anymore. Or we're not going to investigate rapes anymore.
You don't investigate rapes anyway.
Yeah, we're just not going to do that. Hello, humble Canadian. Welcome to the
mad
show.
About it.
Hi, humble Canadian. Welcome to the show. I haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. Vegan Metro, good to see you. Good to see everybody. MDM Niles. Yes, we are having blunt commentary about what's going on with police brutality. Hey, you want to end police brutality? How about you start with ending the drug war?
Yep.
Lots of stories, actually, this week in some not so mainstream media.
Well, we've been watching a lot of comedy also at night to kind of, help balance all the things. But the comedy that we mostly watch are old Dave Chappelle and old George Carlin and Richard Pryor. And y'all, this shit has been happening for generations. It could have been last night that George Carlin or Richard Pryor gave their set. And it was 20, 30 years ago. These guys are dead, long dead. And it's still the same shit. Police cannot be reformed.
Well, even the ones that aren't dead, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, all
I was
of
just
the older
saying because it's
ones.
a long time ago.
Yeah. I mean, all the older ones. I mean, and if you haven't seen Dave Chappelle's latest commentary and special, you should.
Yeah.
After the murder of George Floyd. It is incredibly powerful. And the game is up, people.
Totes.
And this as he says in that special, this is the last chance for social discourse.
Yeah, for civil discourse, yeah.
For civil discourse.
It is.
This is the last chance for civil discourse.
And we saw that yesterday in Palmdale.
We did.
Boy, did we. In Palmdale. It was...
There is much love. Much love. And
very forgiving. They
much anger.
But,
together.
Seems like the younger generation is really very angry, and the older generation are saying, show me. Glad we're out there out on the street fighting for change, but now they're like, okay, now Monday you got to call the mayor. Now Monday you got to call your representatives. You got to actually do the things.
Show back up in City Hall at 7 a.m. and make sure they are following through and they are doing it.
That also, I'm just.
But there would be no investigation. There would be no call for State Javier Becerra to do a hate crimes or some type of state investigation outside of the county sheriff and the LA DA, because it's the LA County, so it's this DA. We haven't heard from their department. The DA, the LA DA, we haven't heard from them on it.
Jackie Lacey?
Right? Yeah. So
you mean the DA that needs to go?
Yeah, that one.
Please.
And so
she's not going to say shit.
We're talking about.
I did send her an email though. That feckless DA.
We're talking about both these young men were over 6 feet, like 6'3", or both of them were very tall. Young men found hanging by implements, one by a rope, one by a USB cord, near or in a tree.
By city buildings.
By city buildings and flags. And immediately, both of these cases, the one in Victorville happened a week ago. 2 weeks now. Almost 2 weeks.
Yeah, May 31st. And let's be very clear. This is not just a California problem.
No.
It's also a New York City problem. Another man was found hanging from a tree 2 nights ago in New York City, Hudson Park. So, y'all, we need to really focus and get our shit together. It's time. We got to end the war on drugs.
Yes, and ending the war on drugs would be, pretty easy at this point to do.
Easy.
It would be.
We may have to wait till after November for that veto-proof majority or a new. I don't think either person running for the top spot are willing to do that. Holy shit! That just happened right here on camera.
Presidentially speaking?
Yeah. Presidentially speaking,
well, Biden
I think both of them would veto ending the war on drugs.
Well, Biden thinks you should have mandatory rehab for smoking marijuana, and he wants to give $300 million, which is literally a piss in the bucket anyway, to police for community policing, which this is they just make that shit up. They're like, oh, now, hey,
no,
you're community policing now. Go get them. I mean, it's a fazul. It's bullshit. But I'll tell you, here's one way the cannabis industry can start to make a difference in defunding police and ending the war on drugs. Because guess what? Every freaking cannabis law that gets passed around this country and the cities and taxation. Oh, we're going to make great money on taxation. You know where a big chunk of that money goes? Always to the police. For drug courts, for, under the guise of community policing, all of this fucking cannabis, bunch of it, vast majority of cannabis money tax money goes to police departments. Well, Portland's not having it anymore, guys. Portland plans to stop using marijuana tax revenue to fund police.
Whoop, whoop.
And that's exactly what the cannabis industry and legislatures in states where it's very easily simple. This would be an easy measure, something you could do very simply.
Repeat.
Is just take the money away from them.
Rinse and repeat, y'all. Across the country.
We need to do this in California. We have a referendum process in California. We should get this on the ballot. We should take all the money the BCC and the cannabis tax brings in and cut it off from law enforcement. Gone. So that's definitely something the cannabis industry should be doing. Not posturing with your hashtags and trying to get on the bandwagon. You have not opened the industry to black owners. Let's just be honest. The cannabis industry is whiter than white. So with very few exceptions, all of the cannabis companies are white. So legalizing cannabis is not the answer. Decriminalization, descheduling, stopping the war on drugs is the answer to taking care of a good piece of police brutality.
Yeah.
In almost every case, throughout the many years that this has been happening, drugs are planted. Breonna Taylor was a no-knock warrant for a drug warrant. And Rand Paul is going to introduce legislation nationally. Rand Paul, of course, outlefting the left. They want to increase funding for police, but Rand Paul wants to do a national version of Breonna's law. Basically, it's basically a carbon copy of Louisville City Council's ending no-knock warrants. All of them, not just for drugs. So we've enabled these. Democrats, particularly Democrats, actually, have enabled police departments in an attempt to be the outlaw and order the Republicans. And don't forget, Democrats were, just before they switched over, they were the segregationists.
Yeah.
So they just changed sides of the aisle and put their hoods in the closet is basically what happened. And Joe Biden created the drug war. Well, he didn't create the drug war. He created mass incarceration in the 90s with the crime bill as a result and expansion of the drug war in many ways, and 3 strikes, mandatory minimums. But the Violence Against Women Act was in there, in the crime bill. So you got to forgive him. Because he got that going for him.
Fuck that guy.
So,
but he's no.
We don't have an answer at the top of the ticket to push this. And and quite frankly, I think Kim Kardashian could get more done with 45 than anybody can get done with Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats in Congress.
I think you're right. God damn it.
I hate to say it, but Kim
damn
Kardashian could probably end the drug war tomorrow if she showed up in his office and said, this is what's going on.
Even though they have been very, very behind the scenes anti-cannabis, I still think she could do it.
Yes.
I'm with you. They've been very anti-cannabis behind the scenes.
That's right, humble Canadian. Thank Nixon for that. That's right. Nixon
Yes.
ultra criminalized the
In fact,
war on
there was-
drugs,
there
created
was a
the war on
story
drugs.
6 months ago about it.
Invented it, invented the term, invented the whole deal for political reasons as well as racist reasons. Primarily racist and political. The hippies, the Jews, the blacks, and the Hispanics. Couldn't
Yeah,
go
don't
after
forget
them.
the Jews.
Don't forget the Jews.
Don't forget the
What's
Jews.
with the Jews, Bob? What's with the Jews and marijuana, Bob?
Yep.
I quote.
Yeah, that's
I
quote.
quote Richard Nixon. What's with the Jews, Bob? Yes, he couldn't go after these. He couldn't go after his racist enemies. His enemy. He'd go after his enemies directly. The racist motherfucker he was. So he had to find ways to go after them, and the drug war was that way to go after the anti-war left, which were primarily were a great deal. None of them, the yippies, were Jewish, and also blacks and Hispanics. Got to go after them too. So they created the drug war to go after all of these enemies of Nixon, and also his cohorts of criminals. So it's a long, less but distinguished career of the drug war, but it is at the root. Well, slavery is at the root, but really the drug war is just an extension of that, as was prisons in general and policing. So ending the drug war, I'd say, would be one of the easiest things to do to stop, slow down, take away a reason for law enforcement.
Down.
Take away a reason for law enforcement to brutalize people of color.
Yeah.
Because
Rest as political tool. I literally right before the show was reading about rest as revolutionary action, which is funny.
rest.
Rest, daydreaming, imagining. When all your life and for generations, your whole concept of living is just to survive. There's no rest. There's no daydreaming. There's no creativity encouraged because you just have to fucking make it through the day. So the idea of revolutionary rest is also very anti-capitalist. So I think it's a very interesting thing to think about. That's all.
There's a lot of things that had to line up perfectly to create this movement in the street, I believe. Not the least of which was the pandemic or plandemic, depending on who you talk to. When you have 40 million people plus out of work, you have not set up any type of UBI or any way for them to stay afloat for the 3 months that you've locked them up. You don't give them Medicare for all. You don't give them now, especially they don't have a job and their health plan connected to their employer is gone. Evictions are going to happen because hey, it's over. The pandemic's over. We're good. We're opening up again. On one hand, on the other hand, they're saying no, don't go out and protest. Don't go out and protest. The pandemic's not gone.
Yeah. Oh, we don't know what these protests are going to do for the pandemic.
But we're reopening. But
Make sure you go to a restaurant.
But don't talk to anybody. Wherever you are.
The first physical contact.
Oh yeah, amazing actually.
We had with anyone outside of our house was yesterday in Palmdale from a black mom who had just preached to us the urgency of our plight. And then she came and hugged everybody. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And we all hugged strangers. It was really powerful.
And
I'd never been to Palmdale. And now I'm going to Palmdale again tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
And I might be going to Palmdale a lot. But this has been amazing. I may have to go to Victorville too. Because we need justice for Malcolm Harsh as well. So
I think there's they're going to try to cover up stuff. They're going to try
Absolutely.
to
Like they do. Cop's
whitewash
gonna
this.
cop. Cop's gonna cop.
But I think there's really something going on here. Atlanta is reporting not only the fast reaction of the burning down of the Wendy's where this kid was shot in the back, but apparently there's vigilantes, white supremacist vigilantes, allegedly roaming the streets or rolling around the streets doing drive-by shootings on African American people in Atlanta. I haven't verified that. I've just seen.
I read that
couple of-
cops were doing that with rubber bullets.
Oh, well, they were doing that. There's video of people roaming the street. The cops roaming the streets, firing pepper balls at people on their balconies.
Motherfuckers.
And that's that's actually what they did on Saturday, Chela, right? Is after everybody had left, the vast majority of the protesters, the support had left, and there was only down to maybe 100, like you say. Looks like they had taken to the streets again, quite possibly, and then the Palmdale Sheriff Station brought their boys out in their riot gear and their pepper guns and made a line in the street. They wouldn't do it when there was several hundred to 1,000 people standing in front of their station, but there was only 100 local residents and no media. The media had basically finished their story and was uploading their 30-second package for the afternoon news. And in between that period of time and the evening vigil, which occurred later, a beautiful vigil, they decided to roll out and do a show of force. And there's video, and I'll maybe find it and show it to you, is from a friend of ours that basically they are pointing their pepper guns at the line of peaceful protesters, threatening them, back up, back up, back up, and threatening them with hitting them with pepper guns. And somebody said, "Oh, don't worry, guys, it's just pepper guns. It's paintball guns." Yes, this less than lethal bullshit is bullshit. These clowns will shoot at you and are just looking for an excuse. And as a matter of fact, the National Guard killed a man in Kentucky last week, where they just are passing some reforms. Where the National Guard and the police opened live fire into protesters, and an owner of a barbecue restaurant, a pillar of the community, often fed police.
Often.
Was killed by a National Guard bullet a week ago or so.
Yeah.
And what the hell? Why hasn't that been discussed more?
Yeah.
They are using live rounds in the streets of America. And less than lethal is not doing that. They are maiming people. They are killing people with these bean bags and with these rounds of rubber-coated lead bullets. That's all they are. And they're doing it with glee and pleasure. And you saw the guy dancing, ready to go, man. The video of the cop dancing with the gun like he was just about to go fishing. Literally. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's like he was ready to do it. The cop that said, "We're going to beat your ass at 8 o'clock to the lady." And they did. The whole concept of policing needs to be changed. 99% of this shit's got to get into the hands of the community. Take it away from those guys. And then maybe they'll have some time to investigate rapes. When they're not worrying about arresting black kids for not social distancing and smoking marijuana.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll investigate rapes. Maybe when they stop shooting caregivers of autistic kids in the street because they don't know how to handle, people with mental illness. So cut every police budget in half. Start there. I don't care what it is. Just cut it in half and shift those resources to the organizations to respond to 911 calls for the appropriate problem. And 90% of those problems are not something a police officer will have to deal with. So let's get rid of there's already the story this week that a dozen cops quit on some force. It might have been Minneapolis. I think it was Minneapolis. Dozen cops quit. Awesome. Like literally quit. Didn't just resign. Just didn't leave the squad they were on. They beat the protest squad. They didn't just leave that. They quit. And I'm like, great, good start. Maybe I hope they weren't the good ones. Or maybe maybe we want the good ones to all leave. But I'm hoping it's the bad ones that are quitting. Because as long as there are bad cops, there are no good cops. That's the point of no good cops. As long as there are bad cops, there are no good cops. Because every cop that has ever stood up or did something or said something was either fired, harassed, threatened, or worse. And if you did see the Dave Chappelle video on YouTube, the latest special, you should definitely watch it. You'll hear about one of the good cops that turned an officer in, a story that everybody forgot about. I forgot about it. And it happened here. Was it here? No, it wasn't here. But it was, did you ever notice that the cop killers always end up being trained by the military at some point? Vast majority of them have military training. There's a connection here. There's a connection to what's going on with all of this. You know, the cops ended up getting, Ronald Reagan made access to excess military equipment for police departments all over the country. And they just ramped that up like crazy. So we have a militarized police force, and we have, I don't know exactly what Dave said in that video. I can't quote it on the top of my head, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but you often find that people that are trained in the U.S. military to go after terrorists in other countries that are killing civilians. That's what they've been trained to do.
Kill terrorists.
Suddenly start killing what they perceive to be terrorists at home.
That makes sense.
And that is what is often included in many of the manifestos, if there is one, of some of these mentally disturbed people.
I'm disturbed.
So I'm disturbed, all right. I'm very disturbed by all of this.
That's why we drove to Palmdale.
And I can see why they would not want the information that we have lynchings happening around the country spreading, because even the normal people, the people that will go back and sit on their couch and go back to their drinking their CBD lattes after Joe Biden gets elected, those people, they start hearing that there's lynchings happening and widely spread information about there's just black men being lynched all around the country in communities. Yeah, they're not going to take that very well, I don't think. The reactions aren't very good. So they're going to try to cover that up if it's the case, and they're immediately rushing to. It's not even like a cover up. They're just rushing immediately, saying no, it's not possibly a lynching. It's not a lynching. It doesn't look like a lynching. It looks like suicide. It looks like suicide. That's what they're saying immediately. No, it doesn't. If you know anything about anything, it doesn't take more than a simple Google search to realize that hanging themselves is not a popular choice among the African American community.
In America. Culturally not done.
Yeah.
Like, swimming.
Yeah.
It's culturally not done. It's not done. And we're doing a lot of listening.
I'm trying.
We're doing a lot of listening.
I'm a loudmouth. I like to talk, and I'm really trying to listen more and more. Zox Elix, welcome back. Cops have to be self-insured and settlements attached to retirement money.
Yeah.
Agreed. Which will make them make their own angry when they cost everyone money, including those already retired. Anyhow, in order to abolish the police and build something new, the government would have to be overthrown first.
We're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's quite possibly happening. Mitch McConnell might actually have a run for his money once that knucklehead is gone. If what's her name, McGrath, the Trump Democrat McGrath in Kentucky, maybe she can lose her primary, and we can get a real progressive in there. Booker, I think his name is, right? Going up against McConnell, and it may be times like now where that will really change. Maybe. All of these, here's the thing, the protests need to not stop.
Nope.
Pardon me while I take a sip of water.
Nah, the protests have to continue.
We need...
In some way or another,
and this hasn't
everywhere.
been as I say, it has been the timing is perfect with the pandemic because everybody is at home, no one's at work, and when these boys were killed, these men were killed over years past, we had isolated protests in small towns where it happened, like Ferguson and Baltimore, where the murders had taken place, but nothing on a national scale. And now we have this, and the new video. And I'm not going to play it.
No.
But the new video that's on TMZ of beyond what part of what I played today of them saying, "Hey, don't do drugs, kids."
Fucking vile.
As if the murder of a man on the streets of Minnesota, of Minneapolis, is merely a PSA for the "Don't Do Drugs" campaign.
Really vile.
You
really vile.
motherfuckers. You piece of shit should all go to jail for murder. And they knew each other. They knew each other. Second-degree murder. My ass. I'm glad there was no deal done for state murder. They were making a deal before they even arrested this clown. So, this aggression will not stand, man.
Mm-mm.
I'm telling you. Hey, let's watch the new episode.
Yeah.
How about that?
Let's talk a little bit more about how cannabis helps dementia, and then...
You know what's good for anxiety?
Cannabis.
Turns out cannabis is an excellent tool for anxiety.
Cannabis
Not just
is
for
great.
dementia patients,
Yeah.
but also for dementia patients.
Yeah.
Because, we do try to focus. It's getting
try to focus.
Getting harder and harder. They're not
Try to
making it
focus.
easy.
Try to
Cops
focus.
The cops aren't making it easy.
Focus.
To focus on good things, but we are trying to provide good information for folks because police brutality is a pandemic. Coronavirus, I guess, is a pandemic, but so is dementia and Alzheimer's.
It totally is.
And it could be happening in the the biggest house, the most important address, the most famous address in the country, 1600 Pennsylvania. Often the conversation happens. So it's not happening enough. The conversation, as Chela said, a lot of these racist rants could quite frankly be because of brain changes, because you do see this in people suffering from dementia. Not to excuse anyone.
No.
But you are one of the most undiagnosed ailments among women because it affects women and people of color.
And people of color.
More than any other people, which might be why there is no treatment and no research and no cure.
Yeah.
And there are no pharmaceutical companies doing any research for any drug or treatment for Alzheimer's or dementia. So we must find ways. We must find ways to find relief. So that's why we started the Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast on Anchor FM. And you can go over to anchor.fm/Cannabis Help Dementia, and you can find where the Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast is streaming from. You can get it to Spotify from there. You can get to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, and we are on iHeartRadio and probably on your favorite podcast network, whatever that may be. And if it's not, ask for it, and we'll get it up there because we want to get this information out that cannabis does help dementia. And we have a new episode, guys. We have a great new episode with some great information. And we're going to take a little break and we're going to watch that episode.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about our guest?
About Dr. Jordan Tishler?
Yes.
Well, why don't you start that off and I'll bring up his website.
Okay, sounds good. Dr. Tishler is a cannabis expert in Massachusetts, and Cannabis Sativa knows about Dr. Tishler. Dr. Tishler has worked at the VA for 15 years, but recently stopped working there because of the crazy town.
Because you can only beat your head against the walls for so long.
For so long, you have to give it up at some point. Dr. Tishler is doing everything he can to share this knowledge amongst medical professionals. He started his own association of professional clinicians, medical associates. And that's on the East Coast, to help make sure that they're getting, the knowledge.
Yeah, to hook people up with real doctors.
So,
like we say on this show, of course, the Society of Cannabis Clinicians being the one that we talk about often, because that's Chela's on the outreach committee.
Yeah,
and a member, yes.
I'm sure Tishler would let me. Well, no, I'm not an actual physician or anything like that. So, no, that wouldn't work. But still yet, excellent that he's doing that on the East Coast, and I really appreciate that about him. Also very interesting, dementia is near and dear to his heart because his father is living with dementia. I guess we could get into it.
Well, it's a fascinating interview. You're going to hear about the battle, the West Coast East Coast battle.
Yeah, there's
cannabis battle.
Definitely.
Did you know that? Did you know there was a West Coast East Coast battle of doctors on cannabis medicine, on the efficacy of certain things? It's really fascinating. So you're going to hear about that. You're going to hear about how cannabis really is an amazing tool for anxiety, and that it is just a great option in the toolbox for many things, including dementia. And let's get into it, shall we? And we'll talk about it on the other side. We'll also talk about a little more news in the cannabis space and what we can do, the actions we're going to take this week to end the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Let's say it. Let's do it. Let's end the war on drugs. All right, here we go, guys. Let's take a listen to episode 9 of Cannabis Helps Dementia. This is Dr. Jordan Tishler. Enjoy.
Get wise, get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down, and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try.
Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Helps Dementia. I'm Chela.
I'm Dave, and right up front, we like to say that we're not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing you hear in this podcast should be considered medical advice.
Right.
We're not experts, but throughout this podcast series, you'll hear from doctors, nurses, research scientists, administrators, other caregivers, and people living with dementia about how cannabis helps.
Like it did for our family.
That's right.
After my mom was diagnosed with dementia, we were thrust into family caregiving and became fierce advocates for people living with dementia, which is how we connected with Dr. Jordan Tishler, who is an expert.
That's right. Dr. Tishler is an instructor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and a cannabis therapeutic specialist with over 23 years of experience. He's practiced for the Boston Veterans Administration for 15 years. Dr. Tishler is president and CEO of the Association of Cannabis Specialists, former treasurer of Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, advisor to Massachusetts Patients Advocacy Alliance, and member of the International Cannabinoid Research Society. He's widely sought after expert and author, and his company Inhale MD is a Boston-based patient-focused clinical practice, and Dr. Tishler also sits on a board of several medical cannabis-related businesses. An expert indeed.
Indeed. Dr. Tishler, thank you so much for being here to talk about how cannabis helps dementia.
Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. How and why does cannabis help people living with dementia?
Wow, why don't you ask a big question? So when I think about how cannabis can help, frankly, anybody, not necessarily specifically with dementia, there are sort of two ways of looking at it. There's helping with the symptoms of the illness, and then there's helping with sort of the underlying disease state. And I think it's important to understand those two differences because there's a lot we can say about the treatment of the symptoms and not as much that we can say about the underlying disease just yet. You know, fundamentally, dementia is something that we don't understand very well yet. You know, and we have some ability to break these types of illnesses down into different types. So there's, you know, Alzheimer's type that people are more familiar with, and then there's frontotemporal dementia and Lewy body dementia, and a whole bunch of subtypes within all of those sorts of things. And what we're really trying to do by cutting these up into finer increments is to figure out what's common amongst them or different between them, so that we can really get at what's going on in the underlying disease. And I'm sorry to say that at the moment, we don't really know much about the causes of these horrible diseases. And as a result, there's been a lot of discussion about how cannabis might be able to help with the disease in terms of either preventing dementia in somebody who may be prone based on family history or something like that, or somebody who's starting to develop dementia and we want to kind of slow or arrest the further development of that dementia. And so there's been a lot of talk about, you know, CBD in particular as a possible antioxidant or neuroprotectant. And I think that that's very interesting, but absolutely speculative at the moment. On the other hand, when we start to think about the stuff that that you've dealt with your family member, and that I think a lot of our viewers are dealing with their family members, and quite frankly, I'm dealing with my family member, my father, is that, you know, there is a whole range of symptoms from at the early stage, understanding that your cognitive function, your memory, your thought processes are starting to fail. And that can provoke a lot of distress, anxiety, and that sort of thing for the patient. Yeah. Right. And then, unfortunately, as things progress, there are, you know, the patient tends to lose sight of what's wrong with them, which is sort of the blessing. But the family members are then left with somebody who is severely incapacitated at best, and at worst, often acting out in ways that are socially unacceptable or and disruptive, or possibly even dangerous in terms of hitting and pinching and biting and those sorts of things. Yeah. And so cannabis turns out to be useful for those sorts of things, even if we're not ready to say this is going to affect sort of the disease itself. Cannabis for anxiety is a remarkable tool. It is. When we think about the science behind that, this is another one of those areas where I have to say, we don't really understand what's going on. So we understand a whole lot about the receptors that cannabis involves, but why this triggers some decrease in the anxiety, that we don't really understand just yet. And the interesting bit to me about this is that, you know, anybody who has used cannabis in a recreational or other fashion can also attest to the fact that, frankly, if you get too much cannabis, it can do exactly the opposite, right? And it can provoke anxiety and panic, which is a horrible feeling. And so it becomes very interesting that you know, when you're going after the same symptom, that is anxiety, a small amount seems to be beneficial, and there's a magic line there, and if you cross it, suddenly it's, you know, all hell breaks loose. And so the key really, when we think about anxiety, is to figure out how little do we need, right? And it turns out that that's the way we doctors think about all medicines, right? We are always trying to figure out what's just the bare minimum that's going to do the job. And the reason
minimum
for
effective
that,
dose.
You got it, exactly. Right. You know, the reality here is that if you go past that minimum effective dose, you don't get better effect. It's not like good and then better and great. It's just, you know, you're getting what you get, the benefit. And if you go above that, now you're only getting side effects, right? So there isn't, it's not a more is better situation. It's actually generally a less is better situation. And anxiety is really one of those areas where that's keenly the case. And the other thing we also have to remember is that there are different ways that we can use cannabis, right? Everybody knows about smoking cannabis. you can be sure that I don't recommend smoking cannabis because smoke isn't very good for you. But inhalation is a method that can be achieved not without smoke, right? With a cannabis vaporizer. And for somebody who is cognitively intact, that actually presents a really good way of dosing somebody with a low dose in the evening, sort of pre-bed. That's very effective for anxiety. However, when we start to talk about dementia, the idea of being able to get dad or granddad to be able to use a vaporizer is pretty much a non-starter,
Yeah.
right? So we're left with basically things that are oral, right? So we're talking about, you know, an edible or possibly a tincture or something like that, that can be managed fairly simply by the relative who's dosing medications. So the thing about edibles, of course, is that they are slow to work, right?
Hours sometimes.
Hours, exactly. And
Yeah.
and
it's really a different drug too. It's a different type of reaction even in the body, right? Because it goes through the liver, creates the a different substance.
That's actually a very important point. So when you take an edible, what goes in your mouth is called delta 9 THC. And that is a chemical, which is the same chemical that you get when you inhale from a vaporizer. But as you pointed out, the first stop after it's absorbed through the gut is the liver, where it's changed from delta 9 into 11 hydroxy. So it really is, as you say, a different medicine. And so there is this, how much gets absorbed in the gut, how quickly and how reliably, that's called bioavailability,
right?
Which basically everything oral, and oral cannabinoids are just not very bioavailable. So there's all kinds of discussion about using liposomes and other nanoparticles to try and make it more available. I think that there's a lot of discussion around that that's probably not going to bear as much fruit as people think. Ultimately, the point is that it's slow and unpredictable as to when it's going to work. Now, on the plus side, right, is it once it works, because it's 11 hydroxy, the actual duration of treatment is longer, you know, maybe like 8 to 12 hours, depending on an individual. So the good news with that is, if we're thinking about trying to treat either the anxiety or maybe later on some behavioral issues with grandpa, we only have to get him to take that little gummy once or twice a day, right? As opposed to if we were using inhalation, we would have to redose it every sort of 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that's really our best option at this point. I'm not a super fan of tinctures in general, only because I think that they're generally kind of an inferior product to a small edible. And the reason I say that is this. First of all, if you ask at the dispensary, they will tell you you put the drops under your tongue and you hold them there. And the implication is that you're absorbing the cannabinoids through your mouth. And we know that actually doesn't happen. So in cognitively intact people, oftentimes what you see, and we've had some studies on this, is that you tell people, you put this under your tongue and you hold it there and it will absorb, and then you're going to feel something. Well, even if they don't absorb anything, they still feel something, because that's Pavlov, right? That's psychological conditioning. So we have a study where they took a bunch of healthy volunteers and they put the drops under the tongue, and they say, you know, raise your hand when you start to feel something. 2-3 minutes go by, people start raising their hand, then you draw the blood, right? And what you find in the blood is nothing, right? So, you know, there is with cannabis in general, there's a lot of sort of what expectations are there and how are they driving people's perception. Less of an issue when we're thinking about our demented relative, but there's also this idea that, like, if you put the tincture in their mouth, you know, is it staying in their mouth? They're probably going to swallow it or spit it at you or who knows what. So that's kind of a challenge that we don't need to undertake, given the fact that it's not really doing anything for us in the first place.
Right. So
the
caps,
other thing is,
really, gummies or caps?
Well, I think that getting caps into somebody who's cognitively impaired is going to be challenging. A lot of the caps aren't terribly shelf stable. So if you're making your own, that's fine, but that's a whole nother process. So honestly, I think that the simplest, most effective is a little gummy. Preferably
Also, sugar is easy to get into people living with dementia.
Exactly, right. And at the same time, gummies are small enough that the amount of sugar isn't a big deal. So if they also have diabetes or whatnot, we're not going to throw off their blood sugars. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend, brownies or Rice Krispie treats or, that's excessive. But, a little tiny gummy here where we're talking about 10, 15 calories and it tastes good enough and they can swallow it. They can chew it up and swallow it. It doesn't matter. It all works fine. I think that's a pretty handy way of doing it.
Cool. So I heard you say that your father has dementia.
Yes, he has a very odd form of frontotemporal dementia.
Wow.
And, it's heartbreaking. He no longer knows who I am. He is, interestingly enough, very calm and peaceful guy, which frankly is interesting because he wasn't a calm and peaceful younger man. He was very bright, very well educated, very earnest, and he was a strong advocate for patients. He too is a physician, as is my mom. And so people who worked for him or learned from him would say he was very intense, perhaps bordering on intimidating, but they all adored him as well. And now, with the dementia, he's peaceful, which is uncommon with FTD, from what I understand. He's interesting too because he's a lefty. And so there are a couple of subtypes of FTD that have sort of more characteristic negative behaviors associated with them, but they reside in one of the brain hemispheres. And because his language and other skills reside in the opposite hemisphere because he's lefty, maybe he escaped some of that stuff. I don't know. Or maybe I'm making it up, to fit my understanding. But it certainly has been interesting to look at his MRIs compared with other patients' MRIs.
Is he using cannabis therapeutics at all?
He is not, which is interesting to me only because, I certainly provided that to my parents, but it didn't seem to be necessary. That is to say, a lot of that anxiety stuff he never had. And at this point, what he does is he sits at the dining room table and he does puzzles, or he does these word search books, so kind of like the kind of things you would have a 3 or 4 year old doing to keep them entertained, but he'll do them all darn day. At 12 p.m. sharp, he stands up and he goes to the kitchen and starts to make some food, which often comes up. Well, what comes out of the kitchen is often quite bizarre, but he's got a sense of time still, and he has that connection to say, noon means lunch, even if we have no idea what lunch means. So he's kind of got this routine, and the kind of unfortunate behaviors that we often see with various types of dementia don't seem to be an issue for him. So he hasn't really needed it. That's wonderful. And he still lives with my mom in their apartment.
That's wonderful.
Except for her, that is to say, I think it's dramatically difficult for all of us, but for her in particular.
Does she use CBD at all or anything to help her manage the anxiety that comes from being a caregiver?
No. And it isn't that I haven't had the discussion with her. Let's just put it that way.
So you have the same problems we have
in trying to convince our family that this is actually medicine.
Yeah, I think I think that this is a common issue. I think in my family, it's not so much that they don't believe that it's medicine, is that, you know, getting my parents at any point to take any medicine, regardless of you know who's saying it and where it came from, is always just challenging. So and I gotta say, me too. You know, I'm always saying, like, okay, I have a headache. Do I really want to take that Tylenol?
Right.
And then I think, why am I not taking the Tylenol? My head won't headache, but there's some fundamental aversion, and I don't know what it is.
It can damage your kidneys, Tylenol. I mean, there's reasons why. Liver, yeah, it can damage organs. You know, I'm not a doctor, clearly.
But you know, not if you're taking a gram, you know, once a month or something like that, right? I mean, if you're taking 4 or 5 grams a day for months,
which people do. Some people do. They pop them like candy every day.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the reality is that pain is a big problem. And I certainly would not want to recommend to anybody that they live with pain any more than they have to. Okay. So, you know, Tylenol is effective as a pain reliever for many people, myself included, for certain types of problems. And then, you know, for a lot of people, it just doesn't work, or as you say, that they have some liver issues, so they can't take it. Then, you know, you get into the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications like ibuprofen and stuff like that. Works for some people, comes with certain risks. The point being, ultimately, is if you can't take either of those two things, you're starting to get into a world of hurt, pun intended, because the only other thing we really have at that point is opioids,
right?
Unless we're willing to sort of entertain the notion of cannabis, which I think is exactly the right idea. You know, it really fundamentally gives us another, you know, 30% of option here, and sort of perhaps most importantly, without some of the very severe risks associated with opioids. And it can be used alongside opioids, and often decreases the amount of opioids that are necessary. Right. So, you know, I'm definitely a big believer in, this is not a magic bullet. It is a valuable tool that, if used properly, can be helpful in a range of illnesses, like the dementia that we're talking about, or anxiety for sort of, you know, otherwise cognitively intact people, or people with pain or insomnia. I mean, there's a whole range.
And all without a black box warning for elderly dementia patients, which is primarily what they will prescribe to them, because there are no FDA approved drugs for anxiety, for agitation. So that's the first thing that happened with our mom was, you know, they immediately put they gave her a prescription for Zyprexa right in the first day. And right on the box, it said, "Do not use with elderly dementia patients." And I asked the doctor later, "What does this mean?" "Well, they could have a heart attack. They're old." And it could happen. It's like, it seems kind of antithetical to be doing that.
Well, you know, I don't want to be the guy who's defending the Zyprexa particularly, but I will say that, you know, there are no medicines without side effects, and certainly cannabis is not different. And that everything is a risk-benefit analysis. So if the issue is, you know, our relative is likely to hurt themselves or somebody else, or even just to feel absolutely miserable because of their anxiety, then, you know, the small risk of a heart attack may be vastly outweighed by the likely benefit of the Zyprexa. You know, there is some increased risk of heart attack from cannabis. It's not as well defined, in large part because we haven't been able to do some of the studies that we'd like to do, but that, you know, that gets into a whole political discussion. But the reality here is that we do see, even in young people, some increased incidence of heart attack. It probably has most to do with the fact that cannabis increases or decreases your blood pressure for a short while, and your heart speeds up to compensate so you don't fall down, right? When your heart speeds up, it needs more oxygen. And if for some reason there's some impediment to getting that oxygen, like if you're older and you have sort of clogged up coronary arteries, then your demand for oxygen may exceed your ability to supply it, right? In younger people, in the 20 to 30-year-old crowd, we don't think that they're likely to have sort of fixed blockages in their coronaries, but occasionally people have sort of spastic coronaries, and so if they go into spasm while your heart rate is elevated, then you have sort of the same thing, which is a downstream lack of oxygen, and that's a bad thing. My point is not to scare anyone about cannabis, not at all.
Right, yeah. Still
right?
doesn't kill anybody, as far as we know. Yeah.
Well, at least directly. Yeah, I think that's the point. But we also shouldn't sort of go, oh, it's a magic bullet. It has no side effects. It's safe. There's no medicine out there that's safe. If you want absolute safety, everything is a statistical argument, and it's based on probabilities. And so at that point, it really does become weighing the likely benefit against that likely risk.
I would love to know about one of your patients living with dementia. How has cannabis therapeutics improved their quality of life? What are they using? And how did you find their dosing?
So, one of the things that is commonly said, with which I have some amount of disagreement, is, everyone's different, so you can't predict how people will respond. I think that everyone is different, but we kind of follow a general model. And, this is, again, true. If there's a theme here, it's that cannabis behaves an awful lot like every other medicine. So, all of the conventional medications have, a starting dose, and you start with that, or sometimes you even start below that. But there's sort of a general range of you start here and you advance it like this, and then there's a sort of maximal dose at which point you don't expect to get better. It either worked or it didn't work. And I think that the same can be true for cannabis. There are a few, but fairly rare patients for whom the dose needs to be below 5 milligrams. 5 milligrams is a good starting place. And when I say milligrams now, I'm talking about milligrams of the THC component, but I'm also making the assumption that you're getting a whole plant spectrum
not an isolate.
Along with that.
You're
not
getting a full
isolate,
spectrum
right.
of cannabinoids, and do you find a balanced 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 to be more beneficial?
No, and this is one of those things that you Californians are into that we on the East Coast have not latched on to. I'm very, very unconvinced that CBD is a meaningful adjunct to THC in amounts greater than what we find in the sort of type 1 chemovar, the THC dominant chemovar. That being said, so don't get me wrong, I think CBD is wildly important as a trace amount associated with THC and the rest of the cannabinoids. But when you start to look at CBD sort of as its own therapeutic, I think that there are fairly limited number of instances where it's really been shown to be helpful. The kids with the seizure disorder, absolutely, no question, 100%, right? But beyond that, what we've got a good handful of studies in mice looking at things like anxiety and pain. And mice turn out to be a really bad model for human beings. The other thing is, how much is mouse anxiety related to human anxiety, right?
We do tend to be on a wheel chasing cheese, so I don't know. Maybe it's pretty close.
Here's my wheel right there.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. When it comes to the studies on pain, what do? They took the mouse and they broke its leg with a hammer.
Right.
How does that have any bearing on my 70-year-old with, arthritic back pain? I don't think it does necessarily. These are the right sort of beginnings of the science, but we need to go beyond that to really get into sort of how does it work for human beings. The thing that really impresses me, though, about the CBD literature is whether you're looking at the kids, the mice, or even the very few adult studies, what you find is that the dose needed to achieve the benefit is enormous.
Yeah.
10 to 20 milligrams per kilogram, right? So if you're talking about a mouse or a small person, it's not that hard to get that dose, right? But when you're talking about people our size, where we're looking at sort of 60 to 70 kilos, you're looking at 600, 700 to twice that in CBD. You know, when you go down to the dispensary or the Whole Foods or the corner gas station and you buy yourself, you know, a little bottle and maybe it has 300 milligrams of CBD in it, that's half your dose for the day, and you just spent, you know, $100, $125.
Well, I think I totally agree with you. Any of the studies that I've looked at or seen coming through with CBD, like the schizophrenia studies in Israel, the dosages are just way, they're so high. It does seem crazy that you need that much of a molecule to get a result, when you could use the fuller spectrum, and, you know, each benefits each other, makes the molecules work better. Is that the case with the plant medicine?
The studies that we've looked at mostly are not isolate studies, they're extract studies. So they're getting full spectrum, and you still need those kinds of enormous doses.
Right.
So, you know, when you start to think about sort of the kind of stuff that's available in California, where you're looking at sort of, you know, 1-to-1 or 3-to-1 or something like that, what I think is going on there is the CBD is really not doing very much. It's just a dilution, right? So you're getting, in a 3-to-1, 1/3 less THC than you think, essentially, right? Could you get the same dose of THC using a THC dominant product and simply taking less? Yeah, you could. But I think that what it does when you dilute it is it makes it easier to sort of take more, and people like more. And it also means that if you mess up, suppose your dose is supposed to be 1 dropper full, but you fill the dropper up an extra, say, 20% one day, because it's dilute, that extra 20% is only really actually about an extra 6 or 7% of the THC, and the rest of it's CBD, which again isn't really doing very much. So the actual error there is less.
Right.
I'm not convinced that CBD is ready for prime time, and I'm not convinced that the way in which the California market has addressed this is truly making a medical difference. I think it's much more of a dilution/measurement thing. And again, if we had standardization, which has been proposed recently, then we would have, you know, sort of just a better way of knowing how much people were getting, and therefore which components were more active. You know, back many paragraphs ago, we talked a little bit about why I don't like tinctures super much. One of the other reasons that I forgot to mention is that when you're doing drops of something, it's awfully easy to screw that up.
Yeah.
Right? If you take a gummy, you either took it or you didn't, right? I mean, assuming you don't stick it in your ear. But when you're doing drops, it's like, oh, was that 9 or 10? Oh, I guess it was 10. Or I guess it was 9 or whatever.
And you never get a good measurement in those things. You can never get an actual half a milliliter or a liter, you know, or it never fills properly. You never get it right.
On top of that, it turns out that the cannabis industry hasn't caught on to the fact that in the science world, there's a standard of 20 drops per ml, right? So patients will call me up and say, Doc, I'm using this tincture, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, well, how much are you taking? And they're like, well, I take 1 ml. I mean, usually they say I take a dropper full, and then I'm like, I have no idea what we're talking about. But even if they say 1 ml, you know, the question is, how many drops are there in that ml, and how much cannabis is there per ml or per drop? Each company does it differently.
Right.
So you often end up in this situation where I know how much there is per ml, but they're doing it in drops, right? Or the other way around. Yeah. And so if we could get onto that standard, at least there would be more interchangeability and more knowledge of what's actually being taken. I tell my patients, if you're going to use a tincture, don't drop it in your mouth. You can't see what you're doing. Yeah. You know, if you move it, you get a drop down your chin. Right. Maybe you twitch and you squirt a little bit. And now how many drops was that? So what I tell everyone is, drop it onto a spoon, right? So you can count it. And if you have a mistake, throw it away and start again. And then when you have the spoon measured out, now you take it like cough syrup, put it in your mouth, swallow it, chase it with something because they all taste nasty, and you're done, right? I mean, that's just, I think, a much better way of doing this that doesn't lead to, how much did I take? You know?
And you don't have to leave it in your mouth for 2 minutes?
Exactly.
How exciting is that?
Very interesting, the difference between East Coast and West Coast.
That's very fascinating. Yes, it is indeed. So you don't think that CBD helps counteract the effects of THC?
That's also a very interesting question. So the short answer is no, and the longer answer is yes, if you take a lot of it, so not just again 1-to-1, and B, you have to pre-dose with it, right? So if you took 300, 400 milligrams of CBD, waited an hour, and then took a little THC, then the science suggests that would bring down that intoxication. But if you're taking them simultaneously and you're taking just a little bit of CBD, it's not going to work.
Fascinating. So you're basically, you have to fill up those receptors before the THC gets there. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, it's sort of. I mean, I don't think we completely understand this, but it also probably has something to do with the fact that in order for you to take that much CBD, you can't really inhale it, right? I mean, it's just too many milligrams at once. So you're really taking that orally, and then we have to wait for it to get absorbed and distributed and stuff like that. So that's sort of what that hour is. And then, as you say, it's kind of doing whatever it is, filling up I don't know if it's the receptors or interacting with enzymes in the pathway, but the point is it's doing its thing. And then you throw in the THC and you have sort of a prepared system in which that THC then doesn't cause as much intoxication. The issue in my mind is, how does that help us, right? Because the classic example is, well, I smoke too much, right? So I'm really freaking out now. And what do I do? And people have said, well, just take some CBD.
Right.
Well, that's great, but it's after the fact. So we know it didn't work. It's not going to work. But you don't know before the fact that you need the CBD, right? Because you aren't yet freaking out because you haven't yet taken the THC. So it becomes a bit of a catch-22. Truthfully, people often ask me, so, what do you do if you do get too much? And there are all kinds of sort of remedies out there, all of which I think are somewhere between don't work and really, quite frankly, dangerous.
I heard smelling peppercorn is a good one.
Well, that's a classic CBD. One, is that you're supposed to crunch on some peppercorn.
Right.
And I think if you're really freaking out and you're that high, the idea of painfully spicy peppercorns in your mouth is a very bad idea. And the likelihood that you inhale a fragment of those peppercorns is high enough, and that could be quite lethal. So not a big fan of that. The theory of that actually comes from some very interesting work that Ethan Russo put forward, maybe a decade ago, but it's based on the terpene from the peppercorn,
right?
But doesn't necessarily mean just because it works in theory that it's an appropriate actual treatment. So I tend to sort of advise people to use more psychological approaches to when they get over intoxicated, things like setting up a safe space, watching some lighthearted television, bringing in a significant other who can sit with you or maybe even hold your hand. Those sorts of things I think are much safer and successful.
Yeah, those are all really good strategies. If you take too much or you find that you're experiencing the paranoia or potential, those sorts of side effects, I find it so interesting that you are not a proponent of CBD. It's interesting. What do seniors in your practice tend to use? What is their starter dose?
Again, it depends a little bit on what we're treating, but if we're sort of circling back to the dementia stuff, 5 milligrams of whole plant extracted into a little gummy is where I would start, and and escalate sort of by 5s if we need to. I would say on average, 10 milligrams is kind of where people get their best benefit, which means, I've got people who are doing just fine on 5. I've got a very small group of people who are doing fine on sort of like 2 or 3. And I have also smallish group that's at 15 or 20. Not many above 20. I mean, I think.
And is that a few times a day? 1, 2, 3 times a day?
Yeah, generally with the edible stuff, I think in terms of twice a day, kind of a breakfast and dinner time thing. It can vary a little bit. So some people metabolize this stuff a little faster. So those people may need to be 3 times a day. But sort of, you kind of asked me sort of where do we start? So my start is 5 milligrams. I typically suggest doing that at dinner time alone, meaning just dinner time. And the theory there is this, what we need to do is figure out the appropriate dose. 5 milligrams might be it, but it's a starting point. And I like to do this in the evening because frankly, if we overdo it, then you can just kind of go to sleep, and that's sort of, a way out. So, 5 milligrams, usually do that for a week or so, see how it's working. Then if we need to bump up to 10 milligrams, do that for another week, see how that's working. People who are particularly sensitive to medications, I might reduce that, or I might also just increase the length of time on any one dose. So instead of doing a week on 5, I might do a couple of weeks, because again, the body adjusts a little bit more, so that bumping from 5 to 10 will be less of a jump after 2 weeks than it was after 1. And so, when we get to the point where we've kind of figured out what seems to be working, and again, on average, that's about 10 milligrams, then I would add 1 in the morning, another one. So if it was 10 in the evening, then it would be 10 in the morning and 10 in the evening. And then just sort of see where that settles out. And if there's a lot of negative activity kind of in the sort of 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then we might have that third one added, in that sort of after lunchtime.
Cool. That's great. So what other ways are seniors finding cannabis beneficial in your practice?
Well, when we're talking about seniors and not necessarily specifically dementia, I think that anxiety and insomnia are huge. And again, the lovely thing about that is a low dose of THC dominant cannabis in the evening, sort of a little before bedtime, remarkably effective, helps with sleep, and also the intoxication wears off during the night. So you wake up the next day, you have some persistent anti-anxiety benefit from that. There's generally, in my experience, very little reason to take cannabis during the daytime for anxiety. That evening dosing is great in that way. And then the other thing we've talked about is pain, and clearly pain is something that one grows into. And cannabis is certainly not the end of that discussion, but it is a very, very helpful addition. And as we said earlier, it's sort of equally effective for mild to moderate pain with the opioids, with a whole lot less complication and risk. So, that's a big part of it. And, how you approach that depends absolutely entirely on sort of what kind of pain they have. Certain kinds of pain that are more acute or episodic in nature are best approached with the fast-acting inhaled stuff, whereas stuff that's sort of more constant, like back pain, for example, the edibles are a better idea because they get us that long-acting effect that we've been talking about.
Right. That's awesome. So, it's really not easy to find a healthcare professional with this specialized knowledge. Can you take telehealth patients in your state if they can't get to your office?
Oh, yes. In fact, now with this goofy virus, everything we're doing is telehealth.
Oh, that's great.
And I have to say, it's interesting because this is another California thing, right? I mean, in California, which is obviously a very large state, Colorado, which is also a very large state, telehealth has sort of caught on in a certain way that it hasn't so much over here until recently. And, at least speaking for myself, I had a certain amount of misgivings about telehealth not being sort of in the same room. I mean, it's very nice to talk to you guys, but if we were sitting around the coffee table, it would just be a different experience, right? And you know, and I also, you know, I think we all worry that you know, we might be missing things through the video, or that people might be more inclined, especially when we're talking about cannabis or opioids, to be sort of not being completely forthcoming with us, and that sort of thing. So I was not super happy about telehealth as a general concept. And I used it, you know, in my practice sporadically when it was necessary. But now that it's fully necessary, I have to say that I actually kind of liking it. And that there's something to be said for, you know, there's a certain immediacy, but there's also this thing there, you get to see people in their own environments, you know, where they're more comfortable. I had a patient a couple weeks ago. She was sitting in her kitchen. We were having a chat, and then her 5-year-old crawled up onto her lap and demanded some attention. And it was gorgeous. It was, you know, he's so cute. And, you know, that just wasn't going to happen in my office. So there are trade-offs. And in the kind of medicine that I do, which really, you know, is sort of a mixture of sort of internal medicine with psychiatry, as well as, you know, pain and a few other specialties kind of rolled into one. You know, the need for me to literally put my hands on somebody's body diagnostically is fairly uncommon. It's not zero, but it's uncommon. And so, so this particular field works pretty well with telemedicine. I don't know if, you know, how it would be to be an endocrinologist or a gastroenterologist or a surgeon or any of those things where, you know, there's really no substitute for putting your hand on people's belly, you know, because that's what hurts.
Pretty soon we'll be able to put our arm in a hole in our apartment and give blood, probably, but, you know, very Brazil-like, you know, in our world.
But yeah, so I mean, it's been, you know, one of the things that really turned my attention to telemedicine was a couple of years ago. I was giving a talk in Colorado on cannabis, but it wasn't a cannabis meeting. And I was talking to one of their local researchers, and he was explaining to me that there are counties in Colorado, particularly in the northeast section, where they have something like 5 million people and not a single physician. And the nearest physician is like 3 hours in a car, you know, and you can start to understand why, all right, maybe telemedicine isn't as good as going down to the local doc who's known you since you were born and blah, blah, blah. But if that doesn't exist, then it, you know, it's better than sort of walking out in the backyard and trying to pick some leaves that are going to make you better.
Now we just have to get them broadband internet to the rural areas, and they'll be good.
Well, that was a huge part of it also. Yeah. And then they had developed a community center in this town that had facilitated things like nutrition and exercise and telemedicine, because they had been able to set up some private rooms with the computers and stuff. So, you know, people are out there doing some very innovative stuff to bring healthcare to people who are underserved. And this stop and think about it.
This pandemic has brought out the essentialness of cannabis as medicine. Certainly, more and more states are on board saying it is essential, needs to be open. You know, drive-ups, deliveries are all being fast-tracked in many places so that people can get their medicine. So, absolutely, in many ways, this is actually elevating cannabis to the state where it should be, as opposed to just, you know, oh, it's just pure, it's just an excuse to get recreational, it's just an excuse to get high. No, actually, people do use this as medicine, and it is essential. And you know, the doctors, Ethan Russo and Dr. Sulak, they did a big webinar last week, and they were all talking about it. Listen, if you're using cannabis medicine, of course, smoking is not good, but if you're using medicine, do not stop using your cannabis medicine during this pandemic. So, you know, generally smoking not good, but it is still a medicine for many people, for many things, for pain, and especially for anxiety in these times. What better way to sort of chill out than with some with a gummy?
Yeah, a gummy. Or, you know, I think that it's awfully easy to say, you know, smoking isn't good for you, and then sort of leave it like that. I would say, look, this is what you need. right? And I don't mean to push this particular brand, although this is the brand that I think is one of the better machines. But the point is that this is a flower vaporizer.
Right.
This is the kind of machine you put ground up cannabis material in it. And the thing that makes this effective is that it's got a little computer in it, right? And that computer is measuring the temperature of the cannabis while it's heating it. So what we want to do in order to get our medicine without any of the sort of poisonous stuff from smoke is 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's the magic number, huh?
That's the magic number. And what we need to do then is have a machine that's not only capable of getting to 350, but the hard part is staying at 350. And that's why you need something like this with the little computer, as opposed to everybody's favorite, these little things, which I call them oil pens, because they're not really vaporizers.
Right.
They're really combusting that oil, and now they're spewing those same toxins into us, plus whatever toxins maybe the company didn't know that they shouldn't put in there.
Right.
So, you know, these I think are the right idea. Yeah, they're not as sexy, they're not as easy to fit in your pocket, but they do the job. And if we're talking about this as medicine, where we really want to maximize benefit and minimize risk, here you go.
Yeah. Well, the speed at which an inhaled product gets into your system is so much better. How do you talk about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system at Harvard and at the Veterans Administration? How do you bring that up there?
Well, I will say that I've had very little success with the VA, and I've left the VA, so my contact with the VA is limited. I gave several lectures at the VA around the time that I left, and you know, as one might expect, the clinicians are very interested. You know, they recognize that they don't necessarily know much about it, but that doesn't stop them from being interested in things that will help their patients. I think this is a general misconception amongst the veterans and the public, you know, but the doctors and nurses there, all they want to do is take care of their patients. Then we get into the politics of the administration and the laws of the land that essentially prohibit that, right? When I was working at the VA, and I was there for many, many years, there was a point at which there was a gag order, meaning it wasn't like I couldn't recommend or prescribe this stuff. I wasn't allowed to even mention it. And, you know, that really rubs me the wrong way, right? I mean, essentially, that seems like a First Amendment violation to me, although I'm told it is not. And that led to many uncomfortable situations. And then the gag order went away. It was not renewed. And that was great. So then we could talk about it, but we still couldn't do anything about it. And that's essentially where we are now. Veterans are often afraid that they can't even bring it up with their doctor because they might lose their benefits. That's absolutely not true. And Washington has made that absolutely clear. Yet the message is not getting out there, and it's standing in the way of veterans getting what they need.
Yep.
But you know, so I gave several talks there. I've spoken to the director of the region and said, you know, whenever you're ready, I'm happy to help. You know, you guys think about this and roll it out and that sort of thing. But they're not ready. I mean, and it's not their lack of interest. It's that their hands are tied. It turns out that for many of the private hospitals like Mass General or the Brigham Women's Hospital here in Boston, the problems are more or less the same, right? Even though they're not a federal institution, something like 90 to 95% of their operating budget comes from the federal government through a bunch of different channels. And it turns out the feds, of course, have a law that says if you break the rules in one area, we can take away your money, not just in that area, but all of it. So you could take one of these hospitals from sort of a $5 billion a year operating entity down to a $5 a year business, you know, kind of overnight by blowing it. It speaks to the degree of stranglehold that the federal government has and how they need to get off the stick and put this medicine into a category that we can actually do what we need to do for patients, you know, and do the research we need to do so that we can speculate less, and be more certain of what we're doing.
Well, that's certainly the a big hindrance for seniors because of nursing care facilities. I mean, in California, we have in the law that residential care facilities that aren't federally funded, they need to create, if they want to use cannabis, they're allowed to create a protocol to use cannabis in their facility totally legally, but it's outside the federal system. In a long-term care facility with nursing facility, can't be done. So that, of course, has to do with the scheduling and the loss of money. Mom was essentially kicked out of the first place that, took her, that we waited for 18 months, essentially because she was using cannabis. So that definitely has to change. And just briefly, as we wrap up here with this amazing interview, with regards to scheduling, I was sort of looking at your position paper with regards to that. Are you looking for a full descheduling, or would you like to see it reschedule? I know you'd like to see a nationwide standard for dosing and for prescription and prescribing for cannabis. How does that fit into the scheduling as far as you're concerned?
So, this is something that actually took me a while to learn, and it's confusing. The scheduling is about the DEA and their control over various substances. The law that governs the FDA is a different law and doesn't talk about schedules. So descheduling can mean either taking this out of the purview of the DEA and giving it to the FDA, or it can mean legalization, just throwing the barn doors open and letting anybody do whatever they want with it.
And that's essentially what they did with hemp and its extracts, is they turned it over to the FDA.
Well, so that's even more complicated, because what they did was they said, look, it's both a medicine and an agricultural crop. So they kind of went ahead and made a bunch of rules so that people could grow hemp and do whatever they wanted with hemp. Then they also said to the FDA, but when it comes to using this stuff in human beings, it's your job to regulate this. But nobody's going to wait for you to actually come up with the rules. So right now, what we have is a whole bunch of legal hemp that's being made into products sold to patients or to people without legal or sensible regulation on what's in the bottle. And
or
so
guidelines or anything, really, anything. Yeah.
We have several studies now that show that if you buy CBD outside of a state-mandated cannabis system, there's a high likelihood that there's no CBD in there, but there may well be heavy metals, pesticides, benzodiazepines, or opioids.
Don't buy your CBD at a gas station.
No, or a Whole Foods or an anything, and or online, God forbid.
Yeah.
The problem is, it didn't make a lot of sense. It made plenty sense to me to take CBD out of the forbidden category, but it didn't make any sense to then go and say, and sure, you can do whatever with it, or worse yet, we're going to expect to make some rules here, but we're not going to wait to actually make the rules to let you guys run off with it. I think that's kind of talking out of both sides of the mouth. I think CBD does need to be regulated. There are people for whom it's actually quite dangerous, typically more on the high range of the dosing than the low end of the dosing. And I definitely don't think that CBD should be sort of just put into food, at least not without sort of a certain amount of warning. I don't want to see that people go to Starbucks and get a latte and, oh, by the way, your latte has CBD in it.
Right.
I just don't think that's, people want
or your burger at Carl's Jr.
Right, exactly. People want to put their CBD in their latte. I wouldn't advise it for many reasons, but that's their business. But I don't think that you should have Starbucks selling CBD lattes, particularly if people can get confused and maybe they get a CBD latte when they didn't mean to have a CBD latte.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of regulatory stuff that's just kind of wonky at the moment. But then again, I think, stepping back for a moment, there's an awful lot about the federal government at the moment that's pretty wonky.
Yeah.
So the cannabis stuff seems kind of low on the totem pole to be addressing at the moment.
Well, I'm waiting for Trump to come out and say, the CBD works for the COVID, and then it's like, oh, God.
well, I think he jumped that shark when he went to Clorox. So,
but Israel's working on it. They're doing applying to do a clinical trial for CBD with steroids to help fight COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable, but let's not infer from the fact that they want to start a study that it actually does anything.
Right.
Sure, no, of
same
course.
in Canada. They can't get the study started. They want to do it, but they haven't been able to get it started. So,
I think it's hard to do those sorts of studies, and really hard when people are so dramatically sick that, you have to have a pretty good basis for the assumption that it might work, right? Like when with some of the antivirals, we've seen those work against similar sorts of viruses. There's less evidence for CBD at this point.
Before we go, I would love if you would please help connect people with other cannabis healthcare professionals. I know that you are the president of the Association of Cannabis Specialists. Would you mind telling the listeners and viewers a little bit about that?
Sure, and thank you for asking. So the Association of Cannabis Specialists is something that I started a few years ago because, quite frankly, what I realized was that there were not enough docs and nurses out there who knew what they needed to know. And quite frankly, there were also some of them out there that were more interested in giving cards than in taking care of their patients. So I set out to find the doctors and other clinicians who were really focused on taking good care of people, because that to me is what this is all about. And so I started this association. We have hundreds of members now across the country and actually across the globe. And all of the members take a pledge. And the pledge says very simple things like, I will spend a reasonable amount of time with my patients. I will follow my patients. I will take good care of my patients. Stuff that, in other areas of medicine, we don't have to have a pledge, or we pledged it when we graduated from medical school. But this seemed a field in which reiterating those standards was necessary. And then the association itself, we spend a lot of time on educational mission. So we spend a lot of time educating our clinicians, and those fall into sort of two categories: the people who are doing this kind of medicine and the people who aren't doing this kind of medicine, but need to know kind of enough to know when it's time to refer somebody, right? And then the other groups are the industry group and lawmakers who, we feel really need to understand the ways in which medicine and patient care is just different from a consumer experience. And so we need to set up regulations and processes and develop medicines that are just different for patients than they would be for a recreational consumer. And if people are interested, as you mentioned, in finding our members so that they can find somebody trustworthy to go to, they can go to our website, which is cannabis-specialist.org. I'll say that again because it's a mouthful. It's cannabis-specialist.org. And then there is, in the nav bar at the top, there's a section that says directories. And if you click on that and you click on your state, hopefully you'll find a few options within your state that can help you out. And if you don't, then you can reach out to me directly. And the best way to do that is to email my office, which is, not surprisingly, it's office@inhalemd.com. Again, office@inhalemd.com. And we get back to people very quickly. We do, as we've talked about, telemedicine, not just within the state of Massachusetts, but frankly, internationally.
Oh, that's great. So you can see patients anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world through the magic of the internet.
That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
Wow. Dr. Tishler, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us
This was great fun. Thank you guys for having me on. Thank you for doing this great work.
Well, we learned some stuff through my mom's journey, so it's important to share with the world how cannabis can help people living with dementia, especially with anxiety and insomnia.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate all of your advocacy and what you're doing to help change the laws and all that you do in the world to destigmatize cannabis therapeutics. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tishler. Have a great day. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
I'll look forward to it.
Awesome.
Take care, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for Cannabis Helps Dementia. Be sure to download and like us on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcasting network.
And please share this podcast with anyone you know in relationship with dementia.
Do you want to tell your story of how cannabis helps dementia? Visit Anchor FM/Cannabis Helps Dementia to leave us a voice message or drop us a note and connect with us on the socials.
Check out the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website to find real medical professionals familiar with cannabis medicine in your area.
Because you remember, we're not doctors.
Just family caregivers turned advocates.
And don't forget, download, like, and share what you learn. Cannabis helps dementia.
Why don't you get wise? Get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try. So get out of your rut. Be able and strong. Give vent to that intent you've had pent up for so long. Come on up and see what it's like being out where you're free. Just do something that's real unique. Do something that's new.
Do something that's new. What's up? Hey, here's the question. Are we in sync? I need to know, because that video going out is in perfect sync going out. So, and the video plays in perfect sync on YouTube, and I want to know if we are going out in sync.
So we're talking to Jason Tube and Vegan Metro.
Yeah.
They seem to be the ones who noticed this most.
David,
and actually, Gypsy Lady Lee noticed it but was cool with it. So if you guys can tell us if we are in sync now, that would be awesome. Before we move on to other subjects.
Are our
Dave.
words in sync?
You silly.
It reminds me of the movie, the classic film by Woody Allen, What's Up, Tiger Lily?
Okay, Vegan Metro says audio looks good now.
Oh, see, okay, so
cool. Thank you.
I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm going out at 60 frames. I don't think it's going out at 25 kps, which YouTube should handle. I mean,
Now
I don't
he's
know
talking
why. I don't know
crazy
why
language. I
it's
don't understand.
it's the videos ought to say. I think I don't know.
Anyway, so that was Dr. Tishler.
You'll be able to watch that in video alone in sync on the channel as soon as the show's over.
Or you could just listen on the podcast.
Well, that's actually an even better idea. You could go over to...
you guys just get the benefit of the video because you're our friends, all 15 of you.
All 18 of you. Over at anchor.fm/Cannabis Helps Dementia, you can leave us a message and tell us how out of sync the video is. No, you could just say how much you appreciate the content. And thanks to Dr. Jordan Tishler, cannabis specialist and educator over at Harvard College. There's some kind. That's a big college, Chela. I understand.
In Massachusetts, but it does take worldwide clients, as do pretty much all the doctors we've been talking to. So if you like any of the doctors that we've been talking to, please do reach out to them. We do have their contact information on the show descriptions. And if you have any question, of course, please feel free to reach out to us. And we will connect you with any of the doctors that we've interviewed with or help find a different one for you in your area.
Because, we're not experts.
No, we're not experts, but we know a lot of experts. And we know how to find other experts. So if you have a complicated health picture, if you're older, if you're trying to really, find your right dialed in dose, talk to one of these folks. Talk to one that, that you feel inspires you. I know that there are some doctors that I feel a little closer to when I'm watching them than others. So if there's one that you really like, please seek them out and get their advice, because they can really help you with polypharmacy and all the things that we really don't know anything about. I know about my body and what helps me. So there we are.
It looks like that asteroid, that comet.
Louis, okay, we're talking about your thing now. We're moving on. We're moving on to the comet that blew up the chat.
I love a good comet about to hit Earth story.
My God, listen, I would be so welcoming a comet, to be quite frank. I mean, the work that is ahead of us, you guys, is hard work. Hard work. The thing that I thought was the simplest, easiest thing to do, rescinding an endorsement that my union gave to a problematic, terrible district attorney. I thought this was low-hanging fruit. I'm like, oh, we can do this. No problem. We got this. Holy shit, you guys. Oh, my God. Systems and systemic oppression are not going to go down easy. So this is a lot of hard work. So if there's a comet coming, that'd be awesome. We can just start over.
That would be the reset button.
Yeah, that would be the reset button. But if it's Thursday, man, fuck, I got to finish Carolyn's house and just hang out Tuesday and Wednesday.
So, yeah, so according to Live Sky, the skylive.com, the comet of which is being referenced in the chat, known as Lemon, nice to know we're going to get hit by a lemon, is going to pass by Earth apparently on June 29th, or hit, if you listen to, who is it in the chat?
What?
Who's in the chat? Louis? If you
Louis.
Louis in the chat.
Louis Campo.
Is convinced this
Louis
bugger's
is
going to
new,
hit.
I think, to us, to our world, to our
He's,
group. I don't think
Lemon.
I've met Louis before.
Comet C 2019 is Comet Lemon, and it is right here. It says, I can't tell how big it is. It has a magnitude, visual magnitude. I don't know how to convert that to size. The close right now, it's
Louis,
100.
do you know?
It's 100 and I should bring this up. I'm not showing this. I'm showing
Show.
So this is from the skylive.com. And I dropped the link in the chat, by the way. Comet C 2019 Lemon, position and find your chart. Kind of a cool interactive site. And right now it's 134 million kilometers away. And its closest point will be to Earth will be Monday, June 29th, 2020.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Louis says it's going to be here before then. Okay, cool.
Well,
Monday the 29th.
who's speeding it up? That's what I want to know.
Come on, man.
Who's
I got some
speeding it
shit
up?
I got to do.
That's when they expect it, and you can look at this cool 3D
29th. Okay, great.
simulator. Let's take a look at the 3D simulator. See where these guys think it's going to
Boy,
pass
we just
by.
got this. Yeah, we always have a silly portion of the show.
I'm playing
We've gotten there.
silly. Well, I am using my dip device.
Right.
Not a vaporizer, by the way. Not a vaporizer.
No, that is a combustor. Oh, look at you. You're really silly. Oh, okay. You're not on camera. Oh, you are on camera. Oh, jeez.
But here is the 3D simulator of this. There's a comet coming. I'm going to get high. I hate to tell you.
You can. I'm just saying.
So here's Earth. And here's where it intersects. The orbit intersects. You see right here? This is the orbit of Comet C19. And this is the projected intersection. Their estimate on...
Wow! That's fucking close!
Yeah, that's pretty damn close, actually.
Louis, you're the best, man!
It's about the distance to Venus, I'd say.
Thank you so much for letting us know. I really appreciate it, but I do try to live life like I'm going to die, because really we don't fucking know anything.
There's the comet, and
you get hit by a bus just as easily.
Oh, it just misses it. Oh my God, it's so close. So close to our orbit.
So Louis has been warning us in the chat that everybody knows about it. I think that Trump would be playing golf all week if he knew about this.
He doesn't know about it.
I don't think he knows about this.
We know usually, but the thing is, we usually hear about these things after they pass. That's when we do it. Oh, Vegan Metros has a dabber too.
Yes.
Doesn't look like that, but there was a massive dab. Well, this is actually really cool. This is not that there's no sponsor. They want a sponsor. They can send me one. But this device is a dip device, dip device, dip. Not not sponsored by Dip at all. And it has a removable battery that is recharged, and then it has this unit which is for dipping, your dabber, and then it is not vaping. It is not vaping. It is combusting. You have 3 temperatures to choose from, and also, but the cool thing about the changing piece is that it comes with another attachment that holds oil carts, because you're not vaping them. Oil carts, as well as pods. You can put pods on the other side. So it's a freaking cool device, actually. And yeah, I have a friend with oil. A friend with oil is a friend indeed.
Yeah,
Doesn't rhyme
Vegan
at all.
Metro. So before that comet impact takes place, are we all rushing Bezos's place? Yeah, that is a great question. What would you do
Dipping, yeah.
between now and a week from now if you knew that this was a thing? You know? Would you try to hide and prep and try to be one of the survivors? Or would you just roll with it and just enjoy your life until the moment of impact? What would you do? Or something else? What would you do?
Well, you don't have control over the situation. So
No control. Mm-mm.
if you live your life to the fullest every day, shouldn't be. If you have peace with your mortality, what's the problem?
Well, I have no problem.
Yeah.
Me, no problem. Okay.
It's not called dipping.
Louis is in the Netherlands.
This is a dip dabber. This is a dipping dabber. Dipper. Dipping dabber. That's what
Brian, what's it called
they
then?
called.
What's it called when you
Dipping.
dip?
Dabbing.
in-
It's dabbing. It's dabbing.
Yes.
Okay, Brian. Point made. It is dabbing, but it's a dip device. And I think they say, you dip it in your oil, which is what you do. I think it's more of the action of dipping for dabbing. Because I don't have a dabbing device. Having a blowtorch around the house is just not something that I want to do. So this kind of, but it is definitely combusting. It is not vaporizing.
Louis, are you a scientist or what
start a bag.
field are you in? How did you know about this comet thing? Because me and Brian and Dave had no idea about this comet thing.
We usually hear
Are
them
you an
after.
armchair scientist? What's your story?
Yeah, are you a earthquake predictor like Dutch Sense? Are you
Yeah.
a comet watcher,
Yeah.
waiting for the comet to land?
Louis, we were on our way to Amsterdam before the coronavirus happened. We were going to stop in Amsterdam for 3 days and then Paris and Rome for a couple weeks and then London.
It was going to be our last hurrah.
It was going to be
Well, it was going to be your dad's
really
last hurrah.
nice, really nice trip.
He's-
But coronavirus happened and everything shut down, so here we are.
Well, everything's changed. Everything's changed. But we're going back to work, Chela. Didn't they tell you?
Some people are, I guess. I don't know, but not if there's a fucking meteor. Not if there's going to be a fucking meteor
hey, listen, we're
next week or this week, sometime
listen,
soon.
Yellowstone's acting up as well as what's the one up in Mount St. Helen? Mount St. Helen is having new activity.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And you learned that from Dutch Since.
From Dutch, and also the Big Island. The Big Island is off of the Big Island. There's a new island being created, and that is the activity that was happening last year on the Big Island seems to have shifted down there. I don't know. Yeah, dip, dab, whatever. It works. It does. I get a great hit. And it's rechargeable. So. And I don't have to use
Boomer.
butane. Boomer.
Barely
Okay,
a boomer.
Barely
please.
a boomer.
Barely
yes.
a boomer.
I just
Barely
barely
a
made
boomer.
it. I'm on the cusp.
So maybe we can make a special name for you, like the Zennials have the millennial.
So is it between boomer and X?
Yeah, you're between boomer and X.
Boxer.
Boxer. Boxer. Yeah, because I don't like thinking of you as a boomer. That's terrible.
Well,
oh, God, that's the worst. No offense, boomers.
Most of the boomers I know are in terrible health or mental decline. So I hopefully I'm outside of that box.
Astrology. I meant astronomy.
Astronomy, yes.
Not astrology.
Listen, we're not doctors or scientists, obviously. But Mercury is always in fucking retrograde. I don't know what the fucking story that is. And I think that's why my videos are not because yesterday I had my stream was so bad. When I watched it later, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe 100 people are watching this. And it was so bad. Just the audio and the sync, and I don't know. I think I know what it was.
Oh shit! Well, you better figure it out because we're back there tomorrow.
Because we're going back out there tomorrow at 7 a.m.
So we're gonna go now.
So we have an early call because in order to get to Palmdale by 7 a.m. we have to leave here at 4.
It's an hour's drive, man.
No.
It's really long.
It's only an hour. And there'll be no traffic going out. Hey, we took the Angeles Crest National Highway home yesterday, and that was beautiful. It was beautiful. It's a beautiful day. It's too bad
It really was a beautiful day.
Robert Fuller wasn't alive to experience
it.
what a beautiful
Yeah.
day it was in his hometown or his family's hometown of Palmdale. And yes, that's where I'm ending the show, guys. We are going to, despite the comment on its way, sometime between now and June 29th, get high and have a good time. Live life like you're going to die because you're going to.
Yes, maybe before next week's show.
And that's
But
William Shatner.
If next week's show
Speaking
is
of
on,
comet.
you're going to hear from Dr. Sherry Afai.
That's right.
And it's fantastic. She's also great. I don't know. I love all of our doctors. They're really good. And if Kathy's still listening, she knows I don't really like doctors. So, but all the
meeting some
doctors
great
we've been
doctors.
talking to are really, really enjoyable and open-minded people, and I'm happy to have them in our life. So
Zoomer. I like that. Zoomer. Like with an X.
Zoomer.
Zoomer.
That's good, Blaster Master. I like.
Yeah.
Zoomer. Zenial. Yeah, that makes sense. Of course. That's perfect.
Human
All
race
right.
is getting canceled. We're getting whacked. We deserve it. Yeah, in many ways we are. Bill
Totally,
Shatner. Yes.
man.
That is Bill Shatner. With a great album, by the way, has been. It's
Yeah, it is. It's a
super
good one.
funny. The universe has had it with us humans. Yeah, I think the sightings
aliens.
of all the aliens and the Air Force letting that out is like, yep, that footage is real.
Maybe the aliens sent the comet.
Maybe the aliens are on the comet. Maybe
the aliens
they're
are the
intervening.
comet.
Maybe they are.
Going,
Maybe
yeah,
it's a-
take that shit out.
Maybe it's a spaceship.
Oh, God, that'd be the smartest thing ever.
Yep. Oh, has been CD. Yes. Maybe. Yeah, I bet you. That's it. I'm Leroy.
good.
Leroy? No, his name's not Leroy. What's his name?
Anthony?
Louis. It's a spaceship. It's a spaceship.
Yes.
I've been playing a space strategy game.
Yeah.
to
It's a
pass the
spaceship.
time between
I think it's a
between
spaceship.
protests to take my
Well,
mind off things.
Good times.
But-
I better try acid before next weekend.
We better. Yes, indeed.
Because I definitely don't want to leave without trying acid. So,
DMT's on my list too. So, but hey.
Okay,
And you're not
write
a
the
mushroom.
mayor.
Hey, you're not a
Wow.
mushroom fan. Otherwise,
I
you'd be.
can't stand mushrooms.
You'd be golden.
Not for me.
Like
but
me.
great for other people.
Yeah.
So Monday I'm writing the mayor and the city council and all of my other elected officials about all the social justice shit and ending the drug war. And by Wednesday, I'm going to take acid. So perfect. Just in case the comet comes by Thursday or next Monday. Oh my God! Next week is our together anniversary.
Oh, yes, it is. You're right.
The 25th. Whenever that is. All right. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. This has been a lovely time. Thank you for the silly interjection, and that was wonderful.
If you
I
can
had
join
no
us
idea
on,
how we were going to get
if you
silly.
can join us on Monday morning in Palmdale,
that'd
come
be
on
great.
out. We're going to make sure we're going to hold their feet to the fire and make sure that the investigation goes down and they get the truth about what really happened.
We're not going to tell them about the comet.
Already there's been citizen journalists and other folks and activists walking around the square where this happened and talking to businesses looking for camera footage because they say, there's no cameras in this square, despite it being a public square in front of the city hall, a library, a fire station, and another public building. No cameras, only traffic cams that don't record. So I said, oh, well, the cops must be talking to businesses around here, and activists were doing it. And it turns out that they weren't. Somebody has one of the best cameras on the block, and nobody's come to him to see if he has any footage until an activist, citizen journalist, came up and said, "Hey, you don't have a camera, do you? What one over there?" So they're not doing a thorough investigation.
They really are not.
And they better get to that footage before somebody else does. That's all I gotta say. Because if it comes out that there is footage of the area, that I think we're going to make people nervous because this isn't what it seems, I don't think. But who knows? We need an investigation, and we need an investigation for the incident in Victorville as well, because none of it all stinks. How do you go apparent suicide in this? Oh, and they're all blaming COVID. COVID is this pandemic has caused a lot of stress. It's true. Suicides are up because unemployment rates are up to such levels. It is true. But they're using that as an excuse to not investigate. It's exactly what they're doing. So justice for Robert Fuller. Justice for Mr. Harsh. What's his first name?
Yeah, Malcolm.
Malcolm Hirsch. And we'll be out there Monday morning doing what we can, listening and amplifying, and I will try to stream on a better platform. Maybe I think I'll just go straight to YouTube. I think that's
a good idea.
I was trying to restream, and it was.
Oh yeah.
I think it
had
something to do with that. So I'm just going to go straight to YouTube.
Simple. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Stay
We're
safe.
gonna walk the dogs.
Love you guys. stay healthy, free the plant, free the people,
Cool.
and get off their necks. See you next week. See you tomorrow.
Maybe.
See you Monday. Maybe.
Check us out tomorrow.
Hey, listen, if the comment's getting close, we'll go live. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Like that. See you next week.
Murderers keep murdering. The churches keep a-burning. The rapists keep a-raping. And the tide ain't turning. Uncle Sam, for all your power, things get worse every hour. It seems to me your energy's all wasted, chasing my friends and me. Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. The terrorists keep terrorizing. Our leaders keep a-lying. The haters keep a-hating. And the planet's dying. Do what's proper. Call off your dogs and your helicopters. The problems of society were not caused by my friends and me. So hey, Uncle Sam, hey there, Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. How many innocent people gonna be imprisoned? We just peace and love and street pop and brotherhood freaks. A touch of Mother Nature never made nobody violent, never made nobody hate nobody or break nobody's peace. It's never been shown to be harmful. Don't you tell me no lies with your caffeine, codeine, nicotine eyes. The cannabis ban is just recent, just since 1938 to re-legalize it, realize it. You made a big mistake. Hey, Uncle Sam, hey there, Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. Uncle Sam, leave us pot smokers alone. Leave us pot smokers alone. Uncle Sam, understand I love you, but leave me alone.
60 Minutes Rewind.
The Kid, the Cop, and the Knife. It happened in Milwaukee more than 2 decades ago, an incident as familiar as the front page of any newspaper. White cop kills armed black suspect, case of self-defense. We report this story not to point up particular social issues. Those issues will be obvious as the story proceeds, but to show how a crime and the punishment affected one man. Shakespeare said, "Conscience doth make cowards of us all." Conscience in this case had a somewhat different effect. Louis Krause, an ex-Milwaukee policeman, age 49. He left the force 22 years ago. If there is such a thing as a broken man, then Louis Krause is one. Louis Krause was cursed by a memory.
Forget about it. Forget about it. That's what they all told me. We know you lied for Grady, but forget about it. It's over and done with.
It was indeed over, but it was far from done with. What haunted Louis Krause was an incident that happened here. Wright Street, Milwaukee, the night of February 2nd, 1958. 2 young police officers, Louis Krause and Tom Grady, on patrol, stop here for a cigarette. A car goes by with a broken taillight. The driver of the car is a black man named Daniel Bell, 22 years old. They stop the car, and according to the police story, Bell jumps out of the car, slashes at Grady with a knife, shouts, "You won't get me, you sons of bitches, I'm a hold-up man," and he runs away. The police give chase. They fire several warning shots. They commandeer a car and continue the chase. The police finally catch up with Bell about a half-mile away here on North 6th Street. According to the police story, Bell lunges at Grady again with that knife. Grady fires his pistol, and Daniel Bell is dead. The investigation finds it a case of justifiable homicide that Grady fired in self-defense. And that is the official police version. Well, there was a chase. There were shots fired. But there is a criminal act in the very heart of the police story, an act that has not yet taken place as the two officers stand over the dead boy. Krause recalls Officer Grady's words 20 years later.
And he said, I think he's dead. He says, I don't feel a pulse. And I took off my glove and I put my right hand down into the side of the neck, and there was no pulse. And I said, yes, he is dead. You've shot and killed him. He said, okay. We got to cover this thing up. I says, it's an accident. It's over and done with. I said, I'm going in to make some phone calls, get some help. And by this time, he started fumbling in his jacket for a knife or a weapon. And he pulled out a little knife. And I just stood there. I was really shocked that he would even be trying to do something like this. And he put the little knife back in his pocket, and he opened his jacket, and he pulled out a bigger knife. And he placed it in the man's hand. And I said, Tom, what are you covering this thing up for? What are you looking for a knife for? He says, just a goddamn kid anyhow. And he repeated that 2 or 3 times.
And a few minutes later, a team of detectives arrived and began investigating the shooting. The man in charge of that investigation was Detective Sergeant Edwin Schaefer.
Schaefer asked me, Detective Sergeant Schaefer, did the man have the knife when you walked up to his body the first time to check his jugular vein? And I said, there were no knives involved except the knives that came from Grady's jacket pockets.
So far, Louis Krause is sticking to the facts as he saw them that night. The next morning, February 3rd, 1958, he and Officer Grady reported here to the then police headquarters, to Chief of Detectives Rudolph Glazer and his staff. And then the 2 patrolmen, along with the senior officers, went all together to see the then district attorney, William McCauley.
Mr. McCauley picked up the pad of papers, and he read my report, and he read Grady's report, and he read a couple other reports, looked up at Inspector Glazer and said, there's too many conflicting things. Get the hell out of here and get me a story that I can defend.
That's a 20-minute, 60-minute special. I dropped the link in the chat. Can't play it all. I'm hoping I don't get a strike just for that, but it's important, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Last chance for civil discourse, people. Last chance. What are we going to do? Free the plant, free the people. Love you all. Thank you, Gypsy Lady Lee, for the super chat.
Oh, thank you
so
Gypsy
much.
Lady Lee.
See you on Monday morning.
Yeah.
On this channel.
See you tomorrow.
From Palmdale. Ciao. Tomorrow. That's tomorrow.